Well, hi students, and welcome. Today we have a very special guest. It's Dee Magnoni. Dee has a very important role at Rutgers Libraries. I'm going to ask her to tell you about this and as well as to correct me. And Dee, this is our search class, and we have folks who are going to be librarians and information specialists across library land and outside of library land. And we're going to be talking today about LibGuides, and that, as you know, exists in all of those spaces. So, Dee, would you mind introducing yourself?
Absolutely, I would not mind.
Okay.
So, hello everyone. It's terrific to be here. I always enjoy working with Joyce. You're very fortunate to have her as an instructor. But I am the Assistant Vice President for Information Services and the Director of New Brunswick Libraries here at Rutgers University. I like to say we seem to like our titles. It took me a while to get my title memorized. But the short of it is I am in charge of the libraries and centers within the libraries in New Brunswick. So that includes 6 libraries and Special Collections University archives, and we do have a couple special centers within the library, such as the Marjorie Summers Foster Center over at Douglas. I have been in libraries for 25 plus years at this point, largely in STEM land. I was an engineering major for some years in addition to my humanities major. And so I've been at places such as MIT, Olin College of Engineering. I was most recently at Los Alamos National Laboratory, where I was in charge of their research library. I've also been in advertising. I worked for Wieden & Kennedy, and they create the Nike ads, is probably what they're best known for. And there I had a musician and an artist working for me. I've been at a cryogenic vacuum company where we worked mostly with cryogenics and vacuum technology. So if you ever want to know about special libraries, I'm your go-to person. As a matter of fact, I have just finished my term as past president of Special Libraries Association. And so I worked in government and academics and corporate libraries, small and large. And coming here to Rutgers puts all of those experiences together. It's a wonderful role, and I love working with students. So it's quite a pleasure to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so grateful for your time. And you illustrated something that we're kind of looking at throughout the course of the semester, that it's really hard to pigeonhole the role of a librarian. We do work across industries, across different types of institutions, and the work is as varied as we are, and we bring all the sorts of different specialties to the job.
Yes,
so, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And all of your experiences in and outside of libraries will someday benefit you in your roles. And someday we can have a separate talk on that.
Oh, I would like that, because I think we both bring a whole variety of experiences, and actually are really clearly illustrative of that. So, okay, but today we're going to be talking about LibGuides, and my students' final project for this class and some others are LibGuides, and I think I've maybe had some trouble making the case for LibGuides. And even though many of these students are online students and they're using them, I'm not sure I've completely made the case. So I'm counting on you to help me not only make the case, but also talk about what effective practice looks like.
Outstanding. I will be happy to at least try, which will bring us a little bit down memory lane of library land, but also into the current and future directions.
That's excellent. Okay. So I think you probably are going to want to share your screen. Is that right?
Yes, I am. All right. So I am going to give a little bit of an introduction to LibGuides, and then talk a little bit about designing them. When I worked at Olin College of Engineering in Massachusetts, I was fortunate enough to be amongst the first customers to SpringShare, the company that created LibGuides, which was their I have to physically forward my slides. And so I know the founders. I know, the garage story of them starting the company. And so I can help answer that LibGuides question that often gets asked, which is actually relevant to the founding of the company and the original purpose of the software. It is actually LibGuides. That was the original intention, although they have no problems with people saying LibGuides. It is natural with many people working in libraries. But the original intention was to liberate librarians from their IT departments. And going back in history, once we got past taking our handouts that we created either on typewriters, and I'm not that old, or on computers, printed them out, and then had our 12 colors of copy paper and brought them to printing machines and made them in salmon or blue or pink and yellow and printed them out. We were instead able to bring them online. However, IT departments would need several days warning in general on making a change to a guide, and to an online resource was generally what it was at that point.
Pathfinder, perhaps.
Yes, online pathfinders. And so LibGuides put the control of the guides into the hands of the librarians. It was a web-based service, and you could go in on your own time 5 minutes before a course was going to happen and change a URL. If we have resources, links out to vendors, and the vendor just rolled out a new version or made changes to a tutorial, well, you could update it on the fly. Or if you found a missing comma or a typo, you could correct it, rather than going in with information that was days old. Because, of course, we as librarians and information professionals are very much like our students, maybe a year or two older, maybe not, depending on us and our students, but we sometimes procrastinate. So being able to correct our guides and change our guides on the fly was a huge leap forward. And they very quickly went from a few libraries to dominating the market. They were the market. They were the first to come out with this concept. And they were very widely adopted within a few short years. And so that was the birth of LibGuides. And why, besides this liberating standpoint, would you want to go ahead and use a LibGuide? First of all, going back in the history, you were getting away from paper and you were saving trees. That isn't a good current need because most of us are not doing paper guides anymore. However, there is a certain amount of normalization. So this is an artist's rendering of immigrants coming in through Ellis Island, and this happened to be the hospital before it was redone. And so there's lots of broken glass and crumbling walls. And this artist came in and he painted depictions of immigrants as they came into Ellis Island. And this is the normalization process. These people came from all over the world. They spoke many different languages. They had many different backgrounds. But within a fairly short period of time, they became Americans. They by and large, learned to speak the language. Actually, much more, they were forced to learn the language of English. Now that is a plus or a minus, but at any rate, they became Americans and they became part of our community here. And so, in a sense, that's what the LibGuides also did. Instead of, let's see, we have 35 librarians here in New Brunswick. Instead of each person recreating a wheel, we have templates that we fill in our information. We have standard tags, we have standard boxes, we use different numbers of columns for different purposes. You can tell you're on a New Brunswick or a Rutgers library guide by just looking at it. And so that normalization is quite useful. Also, it went from being just a subject guide to actually revolutionizing the way we taught. And Joyce, I don't know if you were teaching back when I was starting to teach, but the putting different kinds of tutorials and feeds and content types into a guide, it was something that was just not possible pre-LibGuides. They started out as subject guides, but instructional librarians quickly saw the potential and really filled out this space. And they're probably used just as much for instruction as they are for subject and topic guides.
Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, one of our classes, the students have to prepare an instructional guide.
Aha.
Yeah.
So that was new. And also libraries are using them to collect policies and other common information types. And so once again, we're being able to gather in a similar format different kinds of information. And data. We always, in libraries these days, we are talking about assessment constantly. What is the impact of what we're doing? Why are we putting this much time here as opposed to time there? Where are we putting our human resources, our budget resources? Well, LibGuides provide you feedback on every click that's made within a guide. And when you're using them for instructional purposes, within 24 hours, you can see the jump in statistics. And so you go into a classroom, you teach something, you show a guide that goes with that, and within a day, you can see the numbers popping up, and you can actually say this number of students clicked on these pages. Now, over time, that dilutes a little bit because LibGuides are generally open to the world, unless they're within, say, a course management system, a learning management system. And so you can have people worldwide using your guides. But usually when you're teaching, at least within the first 24 hours or 48 hours, it's the students in the class.
So I wonder if that really matters, honestly, because your instructional voice is scaled. If it's used by people outside of your university or the class you taught, all the better. I mean, you can show a greater impact. It's almost like metrics when we talk about that. Yes. But I love, I love that you're emphasizing this, Dee, because our students are creating guides that are at this point, kind of training wheels. And although they could have real use, they're not going to see the use over time. So the notion of gathering the link type of box, that actually creates granular data over time.
Yes.
Over the course of years, you can see how many times one link was clicked on. So that is not the case with many of the other types of web design options we have.
That's very true. And it is a very powerful aspect of LibGuides. And you can see the metrics down to page level. And I actually haven't created an original guide in a couple of years now. I believe the data is down to the box level. So you can see that, you created a really valuable and impactful tutorial that you've now put on this page, and you can know where to focus your content criteria.
Right.
So designing your guide. You want to think of very traditional design elements, and I hope at this point that I've talked you into the usefulness of using the platform and creating an impactful guide. Part of the win is your design skills, though. If you're creating an engaging, easy to understand and reference guide, then the impact of that guide will be much higher. So you really want to consider the audience that you're creating this for. Is it for, a corporate environment or government? Is this K-12? Is it for the university college environment? Are these graduate students or undergraduate students? You're pitching your content at different levels depending on who this is for. And so do keep that in mind. If it's a K-12 audience, your content will obviously be different. Learning styles are also important. You might have ADA considerations. You should always have ADA considerations in mind, but sometimes you need to up that game if it's specifically for an audience with a different set of abilities and disabilities. Mm-hmm. Consider the content. Depending on what kind of guide you're putting together, you might want to use different numbers of columns. Newsy, updatey kind of guides tend to be more information dense. So you might have 3 columns as opposed to 2 or 1. More media rich might have more visuals right up front and center with some text down the side that will bring you to further links. So think about the purpose, your audience, and what makes sense for the information you're trying to relay. And that also impacts the organization of the content. Hopefully you're building some engagement into your guide. At the lowest level, you have clicks, you have places for them to follow, but you might have news feeds in there, media, videos, little tutorials with pre-test, post-test. You can basically build almost anything into your guide. Do include a profile box of yourself. It's great when you have a photo, or as Joyce likes to use, it's not a cartoon. What do you?
I use a
Bitmoji,
or any kind of avatar. Yeah,
any kind of avatar. I am a Bitmoji fan. I have created a student business card with my Bitmoji self on it. But yes, an avatar is lots of fun, and many of us don't like our photos on cards, but have something that identifies you and your contact information. So when someone looking at your guide has questions, they can contact you. Many times it's a fellow colleague, librarian, information professional that says, well, this is really terrific. It's exactly what I need. Can I reference your guide in my guide? And you want them to be able to get in touch with you so they can give proper attribution to what you have created. Mm-hmm. Don't use too much text. You can tell I'm not a big texty person by looking at my own slides. And although frequently you do want enough text so they can navigate around. These are not user-friendly slides to look at later and know what I was talking about. And so keep that in mind. I'm doing an online talk. I'd rather have you listen to my voice than be reading my words. Let's see. What's on my next?
Okay, sorry.
Oh, did you have a question?
I see you're getting right to it.
Very good. So here we are, enjoying. We in our profession, we do love to share, and especially with attribution. So I am going to give some links throughout this, and Joyce, I can forward you these slides to make sure.
Great.
And of course, the URLs are here as we're recording.
Mm-hmm.
And so this particular photo, I sometimes at least try to explain why I've put an image on a slide. This is my sister and brother-in-law, and he is the very generous person or librarian. He is actually carrying 2 backpacks here, both my sister's and my backpacks, as he walks along and she and I run. And so he is an incredibly generous human being, freeing us to do what we need to do at the time. And so fellow colleagues frequently do that. They will gladly lend you the content or their guides, but please do give them attribution. So this is where the Rutgers library guides live, and underneath that is the LibGuides community, and you will see amazing content. There are just incredibly creative and innovative people out there creating guides on every conceivable subject, topic, course. And it's fun to explore the community. And Joyce has probably already given you this link just to inspire you.
Dee, I think it's really also important. This is, even if you're not creating a LibGuide, the community is often the place I go to get a lead on a tough reference question. It is just, you're not going to be a specialist in every discipline. And somebody's going to walk in and say, what do you know about organic chemistry? And you may know this stuff, but I won't. But I know there's a librarian out there who has collected the portals, who understands what the best journals are, who has selected the database, who has given some general advice relating to subject headings and thesauri, and I value that.
That's absolutely correct. And if you don't have the ALA membership guide, or online to the SLA guide where you can look up someone with their expertise, this is an excellent place to go to look for a guide. And if they've created the guide, they should know something about what they're writing about. So excellent point. And so as you're creating your guide, you don't want to have to reinvent wheels. And so it's wonderful at an institution, a corporate, a central level, to have a couple of core guides that serve as the reference guides to content. So all the databases at Rutgers live on one guide. And so when someone is creating a guide, they don't actually put that original link on, they link over to the core guide. And so when something changes, a URL changes from a company, a database, it's updated once, and then it's correct across all of the guides. It's an absolute best practice to do that. The same with instructional videos and content as well as widgets. So update once and have it correct across your library of guides.
So for instance, your one search box or your catalog box, that's going to be on hundreds of guides, and it's a nightmare to try to update the individual boxes.
Absolutely. And in fact, because Rutgers is also a very early adopter of LibGuides, these practices were not all in place in the beginning. And so when we changed our LIS system this past year, we did indeed find that we needed to scour our guides to find all the references to our old library catalog, our LIS system, and we don't want to do that again. So it's now on the central databases.
But you do bring up another point. There is a dead link searcher on LibGuides. I know that was in your slides, but it's just so you know, it's not as hard to do as you might find on another type of web platform where you have to pay a child to seek out the dead links.
Absolutely. Although work study opportunity.
You're right.
So moving on, you've designed your guide. You have very thoughtful integration to your audience and the content. You're using your central guides to link to content, but you can do so much more by integrating new, innovative, emerging, different types of engaging content, and that includes blogs and media and instructional videos and publisher content. And in fact, those last two bullets, I like to use the instructional videos from publishers because they do change content overnight. You wake up, you go to teach a class, and it's not what you expected. Well, at least the link to the instructional video can be up to date because you've pointed to the publisher video, which is linked on your central guides, and you have updated content there. And so keep all of those things in mind. And then some databases like Credo Reference actually have the ability to link within their database. And so if you're creating a guide on say AIDS. You can go to their reference pages on AIDS and link into a specific article or video and have that piece of content linked to your guide. It doesn't have to necessarily be top level database. And so some database providers do provide that kind of integration with SpringShare, which is really terrific.
Dee, speaking of that integration, I don't know whether you're going to cover it, but it does make a little sense here. We embed things into LibGuides, and then we embed LibGuides into other things. For instance, a learning management system.
Yes.
So were you going to get to that, or is this a good moment for that?
This is a good moment for that.
Oh, what do you know?
Yes. And so absolutely, you can embed your LibGuide into other pieces, which is really the second piece of this, and then the next slide.
Gotcha.
But first, making your guide itself findable out there in the world. If you didn't go to the Rutgers Library's LibGuide index site, what student's going to do that?
I will highly recommend it to these students.
Yes, this class should, but our average student might not know about that. And you can build metadata into your guide so that they are indeed findable on the LIS system, out on Google, depending on how you set up your metadata, and then the OAI PMH initiative to make sure it's findable in all sorts of places and open archives. You should go ahead and do all of this. So that is having your guide there and static and finding it from the outside. Now, to get to your question, you can then take your guide to users and embed it in many places. So you can widgetize your guide. I'm sure somebody has created that as a verb. And I used as a case Canvas integration. That is the learning management system Rutgers is going to go to as the one central learning management system, although I think right now we use at least 4, and I heard there's a Reg Aid 5 out there.
They're trying to get to just Canvas.
They're trying. They're trying. Evidently in the next year, but we'll see. So they have an example and give you instructions, and there's in fact code here on this slide to show you how to create a widget for your guide, and then how to embed that widget in different places. And of course, you can embed an entire guide into another LibGuide. So you might have a general search guide. Here's how to do, your basic Boolean searches, introduction to journals. You can wrap up that entire intro video or LibGuide into here's the engineering LibGuide. And by the way, if you need an introductory video or tutorial, it's in this other guide that's linked right here as a widget. We are integrating them more and more into the learning management systems here at Rutgers, which gives us excellent statistics and touch points with our students. So it's quite powerful, frankly.
I really do want to amplify that, because you will find students, surprisingly, who don't go out of the learning management system, and some students, believe it or not, will not visit the library, whether it's online or physically. And to just be right there to push into that classroom, to have the librarian's instructional voice be present within that individual professor's space is important, and it's being there all the time.
Yes, and frankly, for this class, as an online group of users, this makes an excellent point. We talk about equity of access to resources within libraries. Well, that means more than the people who walk through our doors. It should also work for anyone who's taking a course off campus or who is traveling internationally for a semester or is doing their PhD in another state, has, once again, a physical handicap, maybe can't come to campus. No matter what the circumstance is, our resources should work for our students. And so embedding LibGuides into the library management system, learning management system or course management system really helps bring this home. And Joyce is absolutely correct that many students never leave their course site. And so we need to go where the students are, not have them come to us. And so this is one of my favorites. I actually started with librarianship is like a laundry, and it is. You start with this task list, these jobs, these projects, these options, and you go through and you take care of them, and you wash them, and you hang them, and you iron them, and you put them away, and you say, wow, I'm done. I created such an awesome LibGuide. And you turn around and a database has changed. There's new content. There is new media that should be in there. You have a dirty basket all over again. Absolutely. And so you need to be vigilant. You need to stay on top of content. Absolutely use your main database guides. Use RSS feeds. Anything that will update itself is terrific. But look for your dead links. Make sure your contact information is correct when somebody has moved on. So when you're working full-time in an academic library or a corporate setting and somebody leaves, well, somebody else needs to take over management of those guides. And so make sure that you update that kind of information. And so here I have a tip and a hack here. So for the tip, for databases or journals, use a link that's stable and that will prompt for proxy logins when needed. So if you are linking to Nature, don't go to the main publisher site and just link there. Use the institution's site to make sure that it'll recognize Rutgers IPs. If you're at Rutgers, it'll ask for a login, and it'll do all the right things to get the user to the information that they need to and not be blocked. For the hack, link to a database description page rather than linking directly to the database, and this is what you should be doing in the master guide, or link to a catalog record rather than the online journal. So once again, you're linking to the more stable, permanent, longer term resource. So there's my laundry slide. And that is basically the end of this. I love to share resources. I think people in our programs love to share resources. And so for slides, this isn't LibGuides specific, but I have a couple of favorite books. And one is the Tufte book. And if any of you are in the Boston area, Tufte lives in Boston and he's always giving his seminars there. And you should absolutely spend the $500 or whatever it is to go to his sessions. And he does make national tours. But visual explanations, really, really terrific book. I actually have all of his books. I love them. The other is Slideology, the art and science of creating great presentations. And this is getting a little older now, and yet I haven't found a better one. And it was from this book that I read that piece that people will either listen to you or read your slides, but they're not going to do both. So if you want them to listen to you, make a highly visual slide and, key points in there. Maybe if you don't want them to listen to you, give them lots of stuff to read. Or you have to keep in mind whether they're going to need your slides afterwards. And then you need a blend of some visuals and some points in there so that they remember why you used a picture of immigrants at Ellis Island on a slide.
Right.
With that, we're not live, so no questions right now.
No, maybe from me though. So I was at the Computers and Libraries Conference recently, and EBSCO was showing its new product called Stacks. And it is promising to do what LibGuides does and more. And, and it's also promising to build a community.
Mm-hmm.
So it's something to keep an eye on. I don't know what the future is, but it is interesting that there are now competitors.
That is interesting. And whenever I see a publisher doing something like that, I have just a small hesitation. It's a little bit like when the big search box came that would search all databases. A couple of vendors, and you just named one, didn't play nicely in the sandbox, so to speak. And so if you purchase their product, it wouldn't search databases of the competitor's product. And so you need to really look carefully at these emerging products. I think perhaps some of those lessons have been learned. It doesn't help their competitiveness and market share to be restricting and leaving people out. And so hopefully those lessons have been learned, but it's definitely something good to think through and assess. So SpringShare is here to deliver products that do things like liberate you from your IT department. And they've gone way beyond that now.
I want to just mention how interesting that conversation was when we were at ALA. The Twitter kind of blew up over the debate between LibGuides and LibGuides, and actually the SpringShare people who were in Italy ended the debate by coming in and tweeting, and then there was all sorts of like, yay, and you were a hero because you were the one who brought this up. There are just a couple more points I want to make relating to our students, though. You have made the case for me about LibGuides in terms of user services, also in terms of social capital. We were talking about how the profession is helping each other and that you're not starting from scratch all the time. And the other thing I wanted to point to relating to my students is that when you hire somebody, you are looking for what they've created before. So having a few LibGuides in your portfolio is an important thing for a librarian or an information professional. You look at that, right?
Absolutely. And it goes beyond a straight publication. Of course, sometimes they're peer reviewed. It depends on your institution. But it shows not just your scholarly background, but it points to your design skills, your ability to think through an audience, to pull in disparate elements to tell a story, to create a unified package. It really says a lot about you, what kind of guide you create. If you do leave an institution, you can download and save an instance of your guide, so that when it turns over to a new person and they change it, you can still capture what your guide is, and by all means, put it on your LinkedIn profile or just have it in your digital portfolio. I assume many of these students create digital portfolios.
Absolutely. Yeah, they do.
But just because you leave a place doesn't mean you have to lose your guide.
In fact, you can archive your guide in case of a serious emergency. Can you bring the guide from one university to another? Do you own it if it's the work product? These are just things to think about. But
right. Well, so far in my experience, guides have stayed at the university. I could certainly, keep my content and approach and recreate it. All the links would have to be updated for a new institution anyway. Yeah. You really have to know your institution. For years and years, for example, at MIT, my guides were there with my name on it, all of my teaching, all my materials. It was great. Mm-hmm. And then one day it disappeared. So somebody, after many years, said, "Who was this D. Magnoni?" and made things go away.
Yeah. So any other advice you'd like to leave with my students?
Let's see. Well, with respect to LibGuides and materials like LibGuides, design and the user experience are topics that you should really think about and read broadly on, not just in library land, but the concepts in general. When I was at Olin, let's see, UOCD, user-oriented collaborative design, was a hugely important topic taught to all engineering students. And it really is thinking about your user and involving them in the design process, which, if you look up the word charrette, is involving the community in your design process, is just hugely important. You make a much larger impact if you're doing careful, thoughtful design. And here's another favorite concept: trees, TRIZ. It's learning the lessons of other industries. It was a Russian patent concept originally, but it's generally learning those lessons of other industries. And Tufte is great at this. He looks at the aerospace industries to teach you lessons on visualization, and gosh, where they didn't do it. And so we had a Challenger disaster, and if they had only visualized their data in XYZ manner, it would have been absolutely obvious that there was something wrong. And so these kinds of lessons can be brought to bear. Be creative, think broadly. Everything in your background is going to impact your career. But once again, that's another talk.
Great. Well, thank you, Dee. I'm going to stop the recording.
Okay.
And I know my students are going to be very grateful because this is immediately useful to them.